sure.
Definitely, but that just shows you just how very difficult it is to beat her. I mean, she's getting to the finals so consistently. She's not going anywhere. She is still the player.
Aryna Sabalenka just pulled out of the Qatar Open, and girl, she's far from the only one. Big names are dropping out of this tournament like flies, and honestly, the whole event is looking like it might collapse before it even kicks off. The world #1, runner-up from the Australian Open, decided she'd rather take a rest than defend her ranking points in Doha. Now the entire draw is scrambling, trying to figure out what comes next. Let's break down why players are bailing left and right and what this could mean for the rest of the season. But before we get into all the drama, drop a comment real quick. Do you think these withdrawals are legit injuries, or are players just hand-picking which tournaments actually matter to them? So yeah, Aryna Sabalenka officially announced she's sitting out the Qatar Open, which is a huge deal since she won it back in 2020. But hold up, she's not the only one. This tournament is taking a serious hit from top-tier withdrawals, and you have to ask yourself, what is going on in Doha that's making everyone hit the exit? Sabalenka says she needs the rest after the Australian Open. She just played a grueling final against Aryna Rybakina, and girl, it reportedly took a serious toll, both mentally and physically.
For sure.
Definitely, but that just shows you just how very difficult it is to beat her. I mean, she's getting to the finals so consistently. She's not going anywhere. She is still the player to beat, in my opinion.
She walked away with over £1 million just for making the final, which is nice. But girl, she also walked away needing some serious recovery time. So instead of jumping straight into another tournament, she's taking a break and planning to come back fresh for the Dubai Championships. On the surface, that makes total sense. Professional athletes need rest, especially after going deep in a Grand Slam. But here's where it gets interesting. Sabalenka isn't defending any major ranking points at the Qatar Open this year anyway. Her best result there was winning in 2020, but since then, her performances haven't been anything to write home about. Strategically, this withdrawal is smart. Why grind through a tournament where you're not defending much when you could rest up and show up fresh for events that actually impact your ranking? But she's just one piece of the chaos puzzle. The Qatar Open is getting hammered with withdrawals across the board. Iga Swiatek is now the top seed because the original top seed bailed. World #6 Jessica Pegula also pulled out. Naomi Osaka skipped the entire Middle East swing. Madison Keys withdrew. Barbara Krejcikova is out. The list keeps growing. Players like Marketa Vondrousova are stepping away to recover. Even French Open favorite Leylah Fernandez hasn't started her season yet. At this point, you have to ask, what's left of this tournament? They're basically filling the main draw with players who were supposed to be in qualifying. Alexandra Ayala, Emiliano Arango, Daria Kasatkina, Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, and Christina McHale all got bumped into the main draw because so many top players dropped out. That's not how a premier WTA event is supposed to work. You shouldn't be scrambling to fill your main draw because half your seeded players decided they'd rather be anywhere else. This isn't a small 250-level tournament. It's meant to be one of the marquee events on the Middle East swing, and right now it's looking like a B-team showcase. Now, let's talk about Sabalenka's mindset coming out of the Australian Open, because she was surprisingly candid about the whole thing. In her post-match press conference after losing to Rybakina, she didn't hold back. She admitted Rybakina played an incredible match and that she gave her best, but it wasn't enough. She said she had opportunities she missed, but that's just tennis. One day you're the loser, the next day you're the winner. Then she added this gem. Hopefully I'll be more of a winner this season than a loser, hoping right now and praying. That's as honest as it gets from a top player. She literally said she hopes she wins more than she loses this year, and she's praying about it. That's not the usual confident champion talk you hear from elite athletes. It's someone who just got her heart broken in a Grand Slam final and is processing it. When asked about reviewing her Australian Open performance with her team, Sabalenka's response was even better. She said she wasn't sure when she'd be ready to watch it back and joked with her agent, maybe in a week or maybe in a few days, whenever I feel like, okay, I can move on from this one. She described herself as laughing and crying at the same time, a hysterical moment that wasn't really productive. She was just letting it out. She was upset with herself because once again she had opportunities, played great until a certain point, and then couldn't match the aggression Rybakina brought. But then she caught herself and said overall she played great tennis in Australia, and even in the final she felt like she did her best.
Today, listen to this, Rybakina was just the better player, simple as that. But here's the part that really shows you what elite athletes go through mentally. Sabalenka said, "We'll speak with the team now. They try to avoid me because it's not really healthy to be around me right now." Hold up, that's pure self-awareness. She knows she's in a bad headspace and is literally warning everyone to give her some room because she's not fit for human interaction at the moment. This level of transparency is rare in professional tennis. Most players just hit you with the standard, "I'll learn from this and come back stronger" lines. Sabalenka, on the other hand, is out here telling you she's crying, laughing hysterically, and that her team is actively avoiding her because she's unbearable right now. That's real. That's what actually happens when you lose a Grand Slam final after grinding through 2 brutal weeks of matches. So when you look at it like that, her pulling out of Doha makes even more sense. The woman is emotionally shattered and physically drained. She needs time to process what went down in Melbourne and get her head right before stepping back on court. Playing another tournament a week later in that state, disaster waiting to happen. But now, let's add a little sarcasm into the mix. Isn't it convenient that she's only pulling out of a tournament where she's not defending major points and hasn't performed well recently? If this were Indian Wells or Miami, some big event where she actually had points to defend, would she still be taking a mental health break, or would she magically find the strength to push through? Now, I'm not saying she's faking anything. Burnout and mental exhaustion are very real in professional sports, but it's also true that players are getting strategic about which tournaments they actually play and which ones they skip. The calendar is packed, you can't do it all, so you pick the events that matter most for your ranking, your sponsors, your prize money, and your legacy. Everything else becomes optional. Right now, the Qatar Open is clearly in that optional category for a lot of players. Timing right after the Australian Open, the long travel to the Middle East, and it falling just before Dubai, a bigger, more prestigious event, makes it easy to see why they're skipping Doha this year. Here's the wild part. Sabalenka won this tournament back in 2020. She debuted in Doha and immediately claimed the title spectacularly. That should create some loyalty or connection to the event, but apparently not enough to show up when you're exhausted and emotionally drained. Winning a tournament 6 years ago doesn't obligate you to play it forever, especially when your mind and body are screaming for a break. Now, the tournament organizers, they must be panicking. They sold tickets and hyped the event around the top women in the world competing. Now their top seed is someone who only got there because everyone else withdrew. The draw is filled with players most casual fans have never heard of. The marquee matchups they were hoping for, gone. Half the stars aren't even there. From a fan perspective, that's frustrating. You buy tickets months in advance, expecting to see Sabalenka, Pegula, Osaka, and all the big names. Then one by one they bail, leaving you watching what feels more like a challenger event than a premier WTA tournament.
Some fans might be thinking of refunds at that point. But from the player's perspective, especially someone like Sabalenka, who just went through the emotional gauntlet of a Grand Slam final loss, skipping one tournament to protect long-term health and performance makes total sense. You can't pour from an empty cup. If she forced herself to play in Doha while still processing Melbourne, she'd probably lose early anyway and dig herself even deeper into a mental hole. This whole situation also highlights a bigger issue with the WTA calendar. Too many mandatory and premier events are crammed into too short a window. Players are expected to perform at peak level for essentially 11 months out of the year. The off-season is barely enough to recover from injuries, let alone take a real mental break. So they're forced to pick and choose, and tournaments like Doha end up being the ones sacrificed.